Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here again, and this evening I'm just going to be giving my thoughts on these so-called hearings about Muslim extremism. I would just like to take a minute to actually reflect on that term, Islamic extremism. If one actually pages through the hadiths, which are the essential writings that essentially make sense out of a lot of the seemingly nonsensical and detached passages of the Qu'ran, one will actually take note of the fact that the term Islamic extremist is kind of a redundancy in terms. In the past, I have been sort of more of a live and let live kind of guy. Back during the '08 election, I was actually very outspoken in my opposition to all of the anti-Islamic sentiment, primarily because at the time I didn't really know much about the religion. I assumed that these people were essentially taught things that were very similar to what I was taught. They were just taught a moderately different version of it. The Catholic Church, until about 50 years ago, considered this religion to be a heresy and to be something that was incompatible with Western civilization. And then sometime in the 1960s, during Vatican II, they really liberalized on this. Here is my problem with the whole situation, and I want to make sure this has nothing to do with race, this has nothing to do with other religions. We're just going to be leaving all of that politically correct stuff kind of at the door, and we're just going to focus on facts here. I want to draw your attention to a little article that I read that kind of sheds some light on why the situation that we're in is a little bit more dangerous than I think people are really appreciating right now. This is taken from Daniel Pipes' website. Now, I know he's a controversial figure, but this doesn't change the accuracy of the article itself. And this was submitted by Donald Hudson, who's situated in Singapore, and this was a long time ago. It was back in 2005, actually. Tradecraft, persona, deception, disinformation, cover, Western operational terms and techniques. But Islamic terrorists have their own terms. Taqiyya, precautionary dissimulation or deception and keeping one's conviction secret, and a synonymous term, kitman, mental reservation and dissimulation or concealment of malevolent intentions. Taqiyya and kitman, or holy hypocrisy, has been diffused throughout Arabic culture for over 1400 years, since it developed by the Shiites as a means of defense and concealment of beliefs against Sunni unbelievers. As the Prophet said, "He who keeps secrets shall soon attain his objectives." The skillful use of taqiyya and kitman was often a matter of life and death against enemies. It is also a matter of life and death to many contemporary Islamic terrorists. As so often in the history of Islam, a theological doctrine became operational. During the Spanish Inquisition, Sunni Moriscos attended Mass and returned home to wash their hands of the holy water. In operational terms, taqiyya and kitman allow the mujahideen to assume whatever identity was necessary to fulfill their mission. They had doctrinal and theological and later jurisprudential sanction to pretend to be Jews or Christians to gain access to Christian and Jewish targets. The mujahideen can take the shape of the enemy. According to Christian ethics, lying is a sin, unless you're a Jesuit. That's my own intercession there. In Islamic jurisprudence and theology, the use of taqiyya against the unbelievers is regarded as a virtue and a religious duty. Like many Islamic concepts, taqiyya and kitman were formed within the context of the Arab Islamic matrix of tribalism, expansionary warfare, and conflict. Taqiyya has been used by Muslims since the 7th century to confuse and split the enemy. A favorite tactic was deceptive triangulation, to persuade the enemy that jihad was not aimed at them but at another enemy. Another tactic was to deny that there was jihad at all. The fate for such faulty assessments by the target was death. And that concludes the article. I'm just going to leave all of you with a couple of quick thoughts here. Let us assume, just for the sake of argument, that every practicing Muslim who makes it a habit of attending mosque and doing all of their regular prayers is fully and completely schooled in these doctrines. If that is the case, then there is no good reason to really believe anything they say. You don't really have any assurance that you're hearing the truth from them, whether they claim to be a so-called moderate that is denouncing terrorism. It is a well-documented fact that throughout history, Jesuits in the service of the Catholic Church have actually assumed the identity of other forms of Christianity and have actually openly denounced their own church. This practice, which they inherited from the Alumbrados, who were their actual predecessors in Spain, most likely got this rubbish from the Muslims that were living in Spain, the Moors that carried this doctrine from North Africa, where they were practicing it in various contexts. There is no way to actually know when it is you're hearing a truth or a falsehood from anybody that is claiming to be a Muslim, assuming that this doctrine is taught consistently everywhere. And since this is taken directly from the mouth of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, we are not being unreasonable if we assume that this is universally known and taught and practiced. If you would invite a liar into your house and he compliments you on your drapery, you have a hard time figuring out what his motives are for doing that, let alone the much graver circumstance of determining what exactly the aims are of a massive body of people who are emigrating into your country and multiplying like rabbits. Particularly when you have a democratic style of government where whoever has the most babies will ultimately hold the most power. That is the nature of majority rule. It really says something that the founders of this country understood that direct democracy was an extremely flawed system. But in this day and age where democracy is king, or more appropriately, democracy is now God, this notion has vanished from view. We no longer view the rule of law as being the center of our culture. Now it's the rule of might of numbers. It's not the rule of law. And eventually, the rule of might of numbers will go to those who procreate the most. And if you look at the trends demographically in Western society, we ain't the ones at the top of the food chain. A little bit of cold reality for you. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.